I think the last questions I could have grouped them together, and I gave them to you, so you'll know which ones I'm talking about. So the question about what is the ideal educational environment according to advocates of critical pedagogy, and then the sort of complementary question, or the sort of probably flip side question, is what do advocates of critical pedagogy think about current trends in education reform, testing, school choice, charter schools, etc. And I should just say that the next book that my students read after Pedagogy of the Oppressed is Diane Ravitch's book on the death and life of the great American school system.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is kind of trying to linking those two books together, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because, like I said, basically the 1980s created a different landscape for education. When we talk about critical pedagogy or progressive education, really understanding what that means, like I said, each person has a vision. And the problem is people have visions but no real architectural plans of how that would actually work. So you find anywhere from kind of the very hardcore overthrow the system and restart, I don't even really know what that means, and nobody wants to be responsible for that, to people who are like, let's work within the machine, other people who are like, let's work on outside. So some people say the school is basically a lost cause. You're trapped not only by community consensus, which is what Richard Rorty gets at. That's why college becomes this intellectual rumspringer, because you don't have parents constantly interfering. So students are free to kind of be challenged and put in uncomfortable places. Whereas in K-12, we answer to school boards, we answer to local communities, whether that's churches or other organizations, and there's a lot of pressure. The ideal environment, it's really hard to say because, I mean, for me, there's no real ideal environment. There is, at the end of the day, a struggle to be examined. And what that means is that, if it's a matter of, bullying, what is my position in that? I can't feel good knowing that a student, may commit suicide later on. And the worst thing for a teacher to ever have an encounter is like a student dying on them. I've had 2 students die during my lifetime. One, I think, was an overdose. The other one was killed in a car accident. Actually, 5 minutes after she saw me, which was really hard. But critical pedagogy is not, kind of this, I check in at 8 o'clock and I check out at 3 o'clock. It's this 24/7, what we refer to in philosophy as an ontological practice, a practice of being. And so, it means at 2 o'clock in the morning, you may be texting a student who's freaking out. You may have a student who's like, my dad's going to kill me. He's freaking out because something's happening. So what it means is that you're always on call. Now, for some people, they don't want to be bothered. So when we talk about critical pedagogy, I would actually say that maybe 10 to 28% of it actually happens in the classroom per se. And everything else happens either outside of school or in these other networks of texting, social media that we're involved in. So it's for some people, I would say it's very scary to engage this because it's not just a job. It's not just an occupation. It's something that you actually have to be. And there's a lot of positive consequences, and there can also be negative consequences. So being too radical, putting yourself out there may cause you to get fired, which happened to me because I stood up to the principal and I said, you can't, basically, you can't get onto my gay students for holding hands if you're not going to do that with my straight students. That's not fair. Attacking language in my classroom, I was like, you need to go to your library and pull out any book that has language in it. I don't even want to hear that. That's a very ridiculous thing to me. So, at the end of the day, what happens is in K-12, they're really missing the bigger picture of what's actually going on with these students. And where we actually find these narratives, interestingly enough, is in these kind of, teen, kind of like Glee, Secret Life of the American Teenager, these shows that kind of show us, here's what actually goes on. So for as much as you kind of disavow it and pretend like it doesn't happen, it's happening. And it's even happening at a much worse level with each next generation. So, kind of looking at the ideal place, I think it's really for the person to judge. And then also to be smart about, what are your parameters? Because obviously if you overstep your bounds and you're no longer there, you can't be an advocate or active in that school. So you have to be smart and think about what can I do in my classroom. So very much where critical pedagogy is kind of, or framed around this kind of macro level universalization revolution, Chris and I have really been focusing on what are the micro possibilities and applications that a teacher does. What is the effect of one person? And the other thing too is becoming a benevolent virus. So for the schools that I've left, I mean, I'm still remembered, which is funny, because it was siblings of students I had. They were like, "Oh, I heard about this guy and everything that happened," and so when you become a benevolent virus, you kind of spread, and it's like it doesn't matter where you go, students won't forget what you taught them, and they really start to think about things, and then you find them several years later and see what they're doing, and they're doing amazing things.
Well, it's interesting when you were talking about the sort of culture of students and the way they talk and the way they interact and what they consume in terms of their own sort of cultural consumption. It made me think about pedagogy of the press, and that's really what Freire is talking about, right? I mean, he's talking about this dialogic or dialogic educational process where you really sort of try to understand that, or at least encourage the student to learn in those terms, right? And you sort of, and then the hope is to sort of negate ultimately the teacher-student dichotomy, right? And that sounds like to me exactly what you were doing or saying there, and but correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I mean that's it. It's Freire basically points to a lot of things that had already kind of been said by mostly, I would say, philosophers and kind of private tutors, because formal education for us really wasn't together until basically post-Civil War, when everything started getting together, public education. But it does come down to this idea of what does it mean to dialogue, and I think the biggest thing is to look at specific phrasings of how we talk about working. Do I speak with my students or to my students or at my students? And that with, when you ask somebody about it to distinguish the two, it will tell you a lot about how they are in the classroom. What does it really mean to actually work with a student or live for a student? And I think it's important because I think a lot of times we talk to students, we talk at them, and we talk for them as if they don't have a voice, and that's a huge part. And these students actually have a tremendous amount to say. They're blogging, they're texting, they're on social media, they're twittering like crazy. Yet in the classroom, somehow we think that they're these kind of relegated kind of imbeciles that are waiting for us to expound this glory of knowledge on them. And actually, it's the other way around. Every semester, I have students who I'm just like, whoa, I had no idea, and I'm learning from them. And I think that's the key part, is that there's a reciprocation in the idea, the mere idea of learning. Not that it has to be a top-down or this unidirectional thing. And I think to explore that idea challenges people, because I think some teachers really don't want that. They want to be this kind of authoritative knowledge figure, and I'm right. And a perfect example, if you've ever seen the mockumentary by Morgan Spurlock, Chalk. There's the super teacher who wants to be teacher of the year, and a student corrects him, and he like freaks out, and he's like, "You're making me look bad." And I mean, but what's interesting is each teacher that's in that represents the personalities that we come in contact with. And at the end of the day, you have to ask, who do you do it for? Do you do it for you, for a paycheck, or do you do it for the students? And that kind of altruistic sacrifice for the students, for a lot of people, I think, is not only scary, but it's also, it's not really what they want to do. They want to teach because they have no other options, or however they got into it.
And actually, on that note, if you don't mind, and to continue the dialogue, if after my students view this, if they have any questions, if you don't mind, I'd like to send them along to you. And I know you're busy planning the conference, but maybe just a note or two back would be awesome if you would indulge them.
Yeah, I believe it or not, I multitask well between Facebook and everything, so I'm constantly on. I mean, I talk with my students up until 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes, working on projects or answering random questions. So feel free, if anybody wants to talk more or has questions, they can definitely ask me.
Great. And before I let you go, if you could just talk a minute about the ZZEC conference that you're planning and here at Brockport, so in case anybody in my class would like to attend.
Yeah, I mean, we're having basically 4 world-class scholars come in. Slavoj Žižek, who's world-renowned in philosophy, cultural studies, film theory, sociology, tons of different disciplines. We have Joan Kopchak, who's out of Buffalo, does more like feminism, that type of stuff. Paul Taylor, who does a lot of like media theory, and then Jody Dean, who really looks at a lot of like political philosophy. There's going to be a lot of different topics going on, and actually we'll have undergraduates there all the way up to basically scholars from all over. Topics range anything from looking at Occupy Wall Street and what are the repercussions of that within this kind of Marxist framework and critique of capitalism, to looking at Lacanian ethics, to what was it, queer bodies and stilettos, or was one of the paper titles. So there's a lot there. We're also going to be doing a lot of book promotions, so hopefully a lot of free things. And it's a great place to network and kind of be in an intellectual environment you otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to probably be in.
And it's April
28th, 29th in Edwards.
29th in Edwards Hall. And I will pass on the link that you sent me about the conference to my students so they know about registration information and all that.
Yep.
All right, Antonio, thank you so much for taking your time, for allowing me to take your time to do this. And I'll be in touch with hopefully my students' questions.
No problem. Thanks a lot.
All right. Cheers, man.
Bye.
Take care.